we take a look at news stories making headlines around the globe. Nigeria's Monetary Policy Committee has cut the benchmark interest rate for the first time in months by 50 basis points to 27%, while also tightening liquidity controls to keep inflation in check. Arise News correspondent Frank Omalape has details.
After months of consistent tightening and hold, the Central Bank of Nigeria's Monetary Policy Committee has taken a new path. In a decision that may appear surprised by analysts, the committee, at its 302nd meeting, voted to cut the benchmark interest rate from 27.5% to 27%. The move, according to the committee, is a direct response to a sustained period of disinflation, projecting that inflation will continue to ease through the rest of 2025. According to CBN Governor Olayemi Cardoso, by lowering the policy rate while tightening liquidity controls, it is striking a balance in form of supporting growth, sustaining disinflation, and protecting financial stability.
The committee decided as follows. 1. Reduce the monetary policy rate MPR by 50 basis points to 27%. 2. Adjust the standing facilities corridor around the MPR to plus 250 to minus 250 basis points. 3. Adjust the cash reserve requirement, CRR, for commercial banks to 45% while retaining that of merchant banks at 16%. Also, to introduce a 75% CRR on non-TSA public sector deposits. And 4, keep the liquidity ratio unchanged at 30%.
The MPC also made other significant adjustments to other parameters, while the cash reserve ratio, which means the amount of bank deposit with the Apex Bank, was raised to 45% for money deposit banks. That of the merchant banks is now retained at 16%. By increasing the cash reserve ratio for deposit money banks to 45%, the MPC is essentially tightening liquidity in the banking system, which means that nearly half of commercial banks' deposits must now be kept with the CBN, leaving less money available for lending.
Decisions of the MPC.
On the other hand, the liquidity ratio, which is the minimum percentage of liquidity assets that banks must hold relative to their demand and time liabilities, is however retained at 30%. But how did the committee arrive at this decision?
The committee reviewed key developments in the global and domestic economies. The committee's decision to lower the monetary policy rate was predicated on the sustained disinflation recorded in the past 5 months, projections of declining inflation for the rest of 2025, and the need to support economic recovery efforts.
With this latest move, the CBN says Nigeria's monetary policy is entering a new phase to support recovery. But experts say the MPC must remain vigilant by balancing the need for economic stimulus with price stability. The next MPC meeting is expected to hold November 22. Frank Omalape, Arise News.
Also, Governor of the Central Bank of Nigeria, CBN, Yemi Cardoso, says 14 Nigerian banks have fully met the new capital requirement in the ongoing recapitalization exercise. Before then, the last major bank recapitalization exercise in Nigeria was in 2004, when the CBN raised the minimum capital requirement for all banks from 2 billion naira to 25 billion naira. This was a significant increase that led to a major consolidation in the banking sector as the number of banks was reduced from 89 to 25 through a series of mergers and acquisitions. In the current recapitalization exercise, commercial banks with international authorization now have a new capital requirement of 500 billion naira. In tax, Nigeria's tax authority says revenue into the Federation account has risen more than fourfold in 28 months, climbing to 3.6 trillion naira in September. The bulk came from non-oil taxes, which crossed the 1 trillion naira mark for the first time. But even with the windfall, Chairman of the Nigeria Revenue Service, formerly known as FIRS, is pushing back at criticism over the country's continued borrowing. In other news, Senator Natasha Akpoti-Uduaghan stormed the National Assembly on Tuesday, few hours after her office was unsealed to resume legislative duties. The Kogi Central lawmaker arrived at the National Assembly accompanied by hundreds of her supporters amid heavy resistance from the police and sergeants at arms who tried to stop many of them. Upon resumption, Senator Natasha Akpoti-Uduaghan, who has been on suspension, remained resolute, insisting that she has no apology to tender. The office had been locked since March 6, 2025, when the lawmaker was suspended from the Red Chamber. The embattled lawmaker was handed a 6-month suspension in March, barring her from all activities of the 10th Senate over alleged misconduct during her protest against the reassignment of her seat by Senate President Godswill Akpabio on February 20. It, however, remains unclear whether Tuesday's development restores her full privileges as a senator and if the senator will be allowed to sit with her colleagues when plenary resumes on October 7. Okay. All right. This morning, we're talking politics, but very importantly, the economy and tax. You called it as you called. That's what's happened. We see basis points reduction, 50 basis points in terms of the MPR. Your take on these stories, Rufai?
Let me talk about Senator Natasha's case first, because what happened yesterday is a triumph for the will of the people. We saw the hypocrisy of the Senate, and I'm very surprised how hypocritical our Nigerian Senate has become. Which senator that after their suspension, because I know they've suspended quite a few, the likes of Alain Dume and the likes, did they do a video to show that they are unsealing their office? So it's part of the hypocrisy. But I thought the Senate clerk wrote a letter the other day that the case is in court and some people were supporting the Senate clerk, that she should not return. So why did they go to unseal the office? It was simply because they got wind of the fact that Natasha was coming, Senator Natasha was coming with a full force of people power and her constituents to march there. So they started making overtures. We all have, with sources and empirical evidence, how they were scampering and calling around the day before they finally made the overture, and how they were sending messages and calling that, oh, we are going to unseal our office. And so that's why they did that video to quickly show. They did everything. They made calls to try to ensure that Senator Natasha Akpoti does not go ahead with this planned protest. But it didn't work because it's the will of the people. The same National Assembly that their clerk wrote a day before that she can't come. So what changed? And further, what they now did so that they will still hold the ace in the conversation is quickly, it was just yesterday morning, empirical facts only, that they quickly postponed plenary till October 7. Just that morning, that they quickly postponed plenary, started sending messages postponing plenary. Why all of this? I'm not saying anybody involved should not present their evidence. I always say, in a case where Senator Natasha cannot present that evidence on the issue of sexual molestation, I will be the first to berate her. But why gag the woman? They've tried everything possible. They tried a recall. We forget in a hurry that they tried a recall. They've tried several blackmail. After the expiration of the term, the court again, the National Assembly clerk wrote that she will not come. So why is that the same National Assembly clerk that wrote that the case is still in court, that she can't be allowed to return, they are the ones that went to unseal with the Sergeant of Arms? Now, the National Assembly clerk people not calling representative of Natasha that they've unsealed the place. So why do we deceive ourselves so much in this country? And I keep repeating, people should remember, nobody is God. Your life is but for a term. And when you leave there, you will go and face your EFCC cases. We will say the truth in this country, because the truth will make us free. As regards the economy, Ayo, yes, we predicted rightly that there are good signs coming out. And because of the trending down of inflation, the CBN has decided to take the bold step. But my also quibble with the statistics as regards inflation is that you have just rebased, so you are having a base year effect. Because when you look at it, point-to-point price of things, it's not that things have come down as such in the market. It's just the rate of increase of the prices that have remained the same. So we should be careful. I think a holistic calculation will be, after this year runs out, then you are benchmarking with this base year with the next year to be able to see appropriate figures. But the CBN also say, okay, they want to take a chance on it, which I've also canvassed that will be good for businesses. And I'm happy that they've taken this chance. And at least, yes, 27%, we still want interest rate to go down low because it will help businesses. Because even with 27%, yeah, some basis point knocked off, you will still be borrowing as a business now over 30%, maybe 30, 31%. As regards Mr. Zacchaeus and FIRS, yes, it's a good one. So we're raising a lot of revenue. But let's also look at the revenue we're raising. We're benchmarking with 2023. If you are saying we are making 3 trillion, we're benchmarking with 2023 that, oh, we've made so much money more than that time. Yes, we accept your argument. But also, please look at your 3 trillion today at 1,005 exchange rate vis-a-vis the value of your 700 and something billion at 400 exchange rates. Because you have devalued, yes, the money will be bigger in monetary terms. So we should also be careful. And the argument he was making, that when they asked him that, why are we still borrowing? I don't think he was very honest with the argument. There are many things he was not honest with. At first he said, okay, we are paying the debt on Ways and Means. I thought he should have told us how much we have paid on Ways and Means today. Because that was the same debt that the president claimed that they've paid of declared Ways and Means, which we now know that they securitized. I thought he would have told us the amount that they have paid out of the 30 trillion debt and the interest they have paid. Because he said the debt's on the federal government book. Secondly, we are still borrowing. As of this year, we took a, what is it called, of 21 trillion, or $21 billion. All right. Plus another one that we are going to the bond market for, to borrow for electricity company of about 4 trillion. Plus World Bank loans and other things. This is going to over 20-something trillion. We've added over 20-something trillion to deficit this year. Our borrowing in the budget is about 13 trillion. Our deficit is about 13-14 trillion. That's the allowance for them. So if he's saying that it is in accordance with the budget, based on the spectrum of the budget, we are borrowing more than what is the spectrum of the budget for the year. All right. Because we've amassed over 20-something trillion. Okay. And the budget, 41 trillion, they say we are going to make. Anyway, we are close to that amount because they said we've made 36 trillion. Okay. And the remaining 14 trillion, that is are given an allowance for borrowing for deficits. All right. So that's not tell them not tell us what we know.
Okay. Dr. Zacchaeus Adedeji, a taxman, who bears a very significant name. Zacchaeus, the tax collector. Because the tax collector in the Bible, his name is Zacchaeus. So by some irony, you have a chief tax collector in Nigeria whose name is also Zacchaeus. And the basic point that he is making is that there's been an improvement in terms of revenue, and that we are within about 3.64 trillion. And his main argument is that that gives us a wiggle room to borrow more. And that argument is consistent with the position of the Debt Management Office, which has always said, oh, we have not reached a limit in terms of the room for borrowing. But you then place that against the concerns of Nigerians who say, particularly the economists and even the politicians, notably Mr. Peter Obi, that look, the problem is not with borrowing. The problem is what you do with the borrowing. And hence, Nigerians are skeptical when you tell them that, oh, we still have a wiggle room to borrow money. Because the same old questions will come back to the surface. And what are those questions? When you borrow, what are you going to do with that borrowing? Are you going to use the money to construct road to Gongola? Are you going to use the money to complete the Lagos-Ibadan Expressway? Are you going to use the money to revive the railway sector? Whatever it is, what Nigerians just ask for is not just plain economics or statistics. It's about what? Integrity, accountability in public finance. In a country where we do not have patient capital, you don't have patient capital that you can use for long-term investment. So if you are going to borrow, those projects should be outlined. Those projects, are they going to pay back the money in terms of revenue mobilization? So it is the lack of transparency that always seems to make this issue about, public debt and borrowing such an issue. A country that at the time got the Paris Club of creditors to write off its debt. And then you look around, you see that over the years, Nigeria has chalked up more debts that future generations will have to pay. But if the effect of that initiative is seen in terms of concrete developments within the environment, then maybe fewer people will complain. Yesterday, it rained in Lagos. Oh. It was as if the Atlantic Ocean descended on Lagos. In fact, some people slept on the road.
Oh, yes.
Even this morning, the traffic, people are afraid. They look at the sky, they see it's going to rain. They say, maybe I should stay at home.
3 days of rain promised or anticipated.
Oh, that's what the
Yes,
meteorological department is saying.
Yes.
So we shouldn't find ourselves in that situation. There are parts of Nigeria where federal roads are not working. The railway, we have borrowed money to spend on the railways. The railways are as dangerous as even the main roads. So this is the issue about accountability. It's not that, okay, we're making more revenue, we will borrow more money. Let the people measure the outcome in terms of impact and difference in their lives. Which takes me very quickly to the CBN governor, speaking after the 302nd Monetary Policy Committee meeting. Yes, as predicted by economics, whether it's Muda Yusuf or it's Johnson Chukwu or it is, Bismarck Rewane, there's been, a lowering, a cutting of rates or an easing of rates. And the reasons for this, based on available statistics, inflation had gone down from 21.88 to 20.12, 21.88 in July, 20.12% in August. Now, foreign reserve is in the range of 42.6 billion. So it looks like we're making money. For 5 months, there has been disinflation. Now, we had another economist, what's his name? Dr. Ayo Teriba, on this program yesterday. He said, look, what the statistics indicate is that there's been some progress. But perhaps this acceleration could be more, but we seem to be moving from deceleration. So this probably statistical background, these fundamentals, market fundamentals, must have given the Monetary Policy Committee the confidence to say we will ease rates. But they reduced rate for monetary policy by benchmark rate by just 0.5%, 27.5 now to 27%. The difference is not much. Because the whole idea is that, they are trying to address the issue of liquidity within the economy so that, people seeking credit can get more. Now, how do you get credit with even 27%? It's still on the high side. By the time the banks calculate their what they call management fees and all kinds of fees, people still borrow at over 30%. So industry cannot survive. Who is going to borrow at 30% in real terms? It's only, all these portfolio traders who do short-term business. They take the money, they quickly trade with it. So, but we need to deepen this economy in terms of, access to capital. They say they have reduced the asymmetric corridor from plus 500 / minus 100 to plus 250 to minus 250. It's not much. But what they are trying to do, perhaps, is to just watch the situation. However, monetary policy adjustment is not enough. How about the supply side? To make sure that the supply side, is also strong and, basic things are done there to ensure the objective that Cardoso talks about of financial stability. The other issue that he talked about was about 14 banks having made the recapitalization. The last time we did recapitalization was in 2004, when we reduced from 89 banks to 25 banks at the end of the day. And now, years later, we are having another round of recapitalization, where the commercial banks with international exposure will have basic 500 billion. The smallest banks at the regional level will have a minimum capital requirement of 10 billion. Okay, the devil is in the details. This was announced in March 2024 with a deadline of March 2026. So 6 months ahead of time, we're told that 14 out of the 36 commercial banks that we have, whether regional or national or international, have met the deadline. Fine, good optics. The CBN can boast that we are deepening, consolidation in the Nigerian banking sector. But how about the effect? What is the quality of financial intermediation that we have in this environment? These banks say they are big banks, they are big banks. Are they even lending money? Are they providing money for industrial development? Are they providing support for agriculture, for industry, for SMEs? In fact, even ordinary people like us, when we go to the banks, sometimes they tell you that banks don't have money.
Yes.
It's only in Nigeria that they will say banks don't have money. But if you go to the POS operators, they have money. So there are distortions within the banking sector if the real objective is to deepen financial intermediation to ensure risk management. Cardoso was talking about forbearance measures, that have been taken and all that. But, the quality of the banking is not about, size, tier 1, tier 2, we are in Ethiopia, we are in Kenya. What is the quality of service that is being provided, either supporting agriculture or supporting industry? Finally, as for the Natasha Akpoti-Uduaghan case, I think the persons who have suffered most in this case are the people of Kogi Central who have been denied representation by their senator for 6 months. And that is why it is important that we move beyond all of this drama very quickly. The melodrama is just childish, in fact, in my view. They don't need it. One man called, I think his name is Alabi Adedeji. I'm the deputy director, sergeant at arms, and then they provided video. Look, we have been told previously that the Senate was in recess. They were to come back September 23. And okay, they extended it now to October 7, maybe because some are still stuck somewhere, or some of them are hanging around the premises of the United Nations General Assembly, where they have nothing concrete to contribute. But it's okay. That's Nigerian behavior. When they come back, let them just focus on the rules that Justice Bintan Yako had advised them to take a look at and to ensure order. And then every senator must also try to find accommodation and behave within the scope of the rules. As for Natasha Akpoti-Uduaghan, I don't think she needs any further drama. She has said she will not apologize and all of that. Yesterday, she has this band of street urchins who followed her to the National Assembly. That was not necessary. She could just have resumed, and then we'll move on to serve her people. She says she has issues about Ajaokuta, about petrochemicals, quality things that she wants to contribute on. Can she just focus on those contributions? The Senate and both Senator Natasha, in handling this matter, have both not behaved in a distinguished manner. And that should be embarrassing to all of us.
All right. Dr. Bati has constituents might take offense and you refer to them
You
as
call them
urchins.
band of street urchins.
They are actually constituents from Kogi Central, and they'd come out to march in solidarity. In solidarity of their representative.
Hope you are well ready.
Of their senator.
It's not just people from Kogi Central. Even our supporters. But I've said my own. And I have enough courage and competence to stand by my
All right, okay. But let me go straight in. because I have a very short time now, just to touch very briefly on the stories this morning. Let me start with Senator Natasha Akpoti-Uduaghan, since that's where Dr. Bati stopped. Now, it's interesting and to mention that she has finally resumed office. I remember the back and forth. I must say that I had to refer back to yesterday's conversation around the potential elongation of term limits for the presidency at his will. And when, Dr. Bati, you spoke very strongly about the fact that Nigeria is not like some other African countries where they just in docility accept whatever happens at that level. And we've seen this play out. And so maybe perhaps it's boosting my confidence to see that it will not happen here. With what has happened with Senator Natasha Akpoti-Uduaghan, that woman fought. She never kept quiet, and she kept going on and on until this matter was resolved. I pay kudos to everyone who stood by her, because on one hand, we're talking about the fact that the governor of Rivers State ought to have spoken up, stood up, and ensured that he, defended democracy in his state. And so what she has done is in defense of democracy to ensure that her voice was not silenced. I say this in light of the fact that we're talking about the special reserve bill for women, more women representation in the National Assembly. I think it's beyond having representation in the National Assembly for women. I think it's also providing an enabling environment for them to thrive, because the silence of the other women legislators was very loud. A number of them hardly said anything aside from the beginning when they came out to grant interviews here and there. But when it came to supporting one of their own, they were actually quite silent. So I give kudos to all the other women groups who stood up and ensured that the matter was never put to the back burner until the Senate was able to respond to her. This is what active pressure, good pressure can do. And that is why the people cannot afford to keep quiet. And so that's why I applaud some of those who rose up with her yesterday to follow her to the Senate to see what would happen. And at the end of the day, even though they were tear gassed, let's not talk about that, by the way, because when we will stop tear gassing our citizens for their right to protest, when we will stop tear gassing them? But anyways, that's out of the way. They tear gassed them, but she was able to resume office, and now hopefully she can do what she was elected to do by her people. The people of Kogi Central deserve representation, and I'm glad that finally this is now happening. Now, she spoke about the high-handedness and the dictatorship-like leadership of the Senate president. That has to come into question. We're talking about a strong democracy yesterday, and that if we must have a thriving democracy, we need strong institutions like the legislature, like the judiciary. We need to speak up about things like that. I also think there are pertinent issues that must not be swept under the carpet in this particular matter. It shouldn't just be kumbaya, let us now work. What are the issues that brought us to this level? If we don't deal with them, if we don't investigate this claim around sexual harassment in the Senate, then we will have a repeat of that happening, and we're going to come back again to this particular issue and continue to deal with it. We need to ensure that our institutions are upheld and we protect it. It is not just for us now, it is for posterity's sake. And that's why I think what she did was very important. And this one, I give her kudos for standing up. What now remains would be whether she's able to defend her claim, because that's very important. I think that ought to see the light of day. Now, moving on to Dr. Zak Adedeji, very important points around him announcing that they've been able to increase revenue for the government by in fourfolds. And this is very important because we need these revenues generated by his office for infrastructural development across the country. When it comes to allocation from taxes received by his office, it is spread across the federal, the state, and the local government. And this is very important for payment of salaries, for infrastructural development, healthcare, education development, roads, and the likes. When announcements of more revenues like this are made, just as it was done when we talked about the FAC allocations to state and local government area from the center, I talked about the fact that this is now time for the people who have this tax burdens to scrutinize very closely how this money is spent. And so what we need to begin to ask for is accountability. It's not enough to say that, oh yes, our chest is now full of money. What does that translate to in terms of infrastructural development at every tier of government, every level of government, whether it be the local government, state government, or federal government? We don't want to hear about announcements of a job well done in allocation, in revenue allocation, in revenue, being able to show up revenue. What we want to see is that we now have more roads that are being fixed. We now have a better healthcare system in Nigeria. We now have better education, an education sector for Nigerians. These are the things that we want to measure beyond the amount of money. So it's good that he's come out to announce how much money has been realized. But even more importantly is how this money is being spent for the good of the Nigerian people. I wish I could say more, but thankfully we have, have guests in today's show talking about and breaking down these issues so that we can really dissect some of the very important topics this morning in Nigeria.